So Wembley didn't go to plan, and now of course that's fine, it happens, but I'm asking the question, did tactics cost Nottingham Forest a good chance at Wembley in the finals of the FA Cup? I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what I think and also the reasons why I actually do believe that tactics cost Forest, but what can they do going forward? So overall, I think that the game, in my opinion, it could have been completely different. Now, in general, the first half I thought was a really poor performance. There was a lack of composure in midfield, specifically Danilo really struggled. I feel like Anderson, Dominguez and Danilo, albeit Anderson definitely the sharpest out of all three of them, they all kind of covered the same space, and I'm not sure they could deal with Man City's rotations, which is something that they are one of the best teams in the world for the rotations, but Forest couldn't deal with that. They just struggled to communicate in that area, and it looked a bit strange, to be honest. The first half just really wasn't it. Conceding early, poor defending, let's be honest. You need to close your man down in those areas. It was more than doable, but it didn't happen. So the first half, not so great. The second half, better. I'll kind of get on to why I think the reason that it was better. And I do think it comes down to literally changing one player for another. But in general, the second half was better. There was a lot more fight. I think that Forest were unlucky. They got denied by the crossbar, they got denied by the post. The woodwork was cursed. It was cursed. On another day, perhaps you could say, and we could be doing a vlog saying, hey, it's 3-2 Forest, great comeback, this and this. But that isn't the case. Forest, of course, there wasn't a penalty given against Zach Abbert for a potential handball, which I don't think was a handball anyway. But nonetheless, Man City went and scored the corner. Matt Sells was going to come out, he didn't. Vardiol jumps, heads it, Murillo misses the header. Things just went wrong. And that is not the ideal scenario at Wembley. Of course, we want a good day out of Wembley. But as it goes, it was a bit of a bad day at the office in that first half especially. In the second half, just got a bit unlucky. And that is how it goes. But how can Forest sort of improve that? And actually, before I get on to that, let's talk about Zach Abbert, because he made a bit of history yesterday. So he's the second youngest player to play in the FA Cup, after Marcus Rashford. So it was a bit of a crazy shout. Before the game, we kind of knew that there was going to be a bit of a crazy introduction to the squad. And did I expect it was Zach Abbert? No. But that being said, am I against it? Well, no, not necessarily. I kind of thought maybe Forest are looking for the sort of back three approach in terms of, even though it was a back four, obviously, they're looking to have three centre-backs in the defence, one of the full-backs going higher, and Forest wanted to attack down the left side a lot more. I'm assuming because of Mateus Nunes being the full-back. Didn't really work out, but Forest wanted to attack the left side more. Zach Abbert can play in that sort of back three, when in reality it was quite a sort of solid back four. Abbert was being a full-back. And he did a good job for me. He did really good cover. We didn't have to discuss him much. Unfortunately, came off with what looked like he sort of tweaked his hamstring a little bit. Hopefully he's okay. But I thought he put in a solid performance. Caught for pace a little bit at times, but that's natural. It happens. And it's something that he can learn about positioning, especially with some of the best players in the world. That is always a problem you're going to face, positioning and pace. But for me, Zach Abbert did a really great job. He made the academy proud. He made the football club proud. His interview was really well spoken. He speaks a lot like Yatesy, which is really nice to see, that sort of players like Ryan Yates are having a big influence on the academy and letting players know that it is possible to break through. Even though it's tough, it's possible. And these moments where there's a lot of injuries and there's a lot of sort of difficult selection problems, that is when they can step up. So big props to Zach Abbert, did a really good job. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens next. The only thing I was disappointed in, and it's not actually to do with Zach Abbert, it's not his fault. He made so many runs down the right-hand side, but because of that balance issue that I spoke about earlier, no one wanted to pass to him. There was so much focus on attacking down the left-hand side, but no one wanted to pass to Abbert, who was in a bucket load of space. So that's another thing I'd look at. It's almost like they didn't trust him a little bit. It was a bit strange, but Abbert, for me, credit to him. He was a real positive and a positive shining light through what was a bit of an unfortunate, difficult day at Wembley. So let's talk about the unbalance then. So I kind of mentioned it earlier. The reason I think there was an unbalance was because you've almost started with no right winger. You've started with Dominguez, who's kind of the inverted winger, but he's more coming to midfield. So you've got, three in midfield, obviously Gibbs White as well, so four in midfield, and then you've got no right winger. it was just a little bit awkward. I felt that even in the first 10 minutes, I was saying that when Forest did get a sniff at the ball, which was rare, and by the way, you'd expect that. It's Manchester City. They're going to retain possession. It's what they do. But when you get the ball, you want to have as many sort of ways of attacking. That is the whole point of being a counter-attacking football team, is you need as many dimensions possible available as quickly as you can, and you need to be able to get there quickly and efficiently. That's the whole point of counter-attacking. And that is something that I think Forest really missed in that first half, and it was quite odd. I will be honest. I don't often say that Nuno gets it wrong, because he doesn't get it wrong. Forest are third for a reason, and that is because of Nuno putting in the hard yards and thinking and analysing games. How can we win this football match? But in that case, I sort of understand what he was trying to do. He wants to overload the left side. He wants to panic Matheus Nunes. I get it. But it didn't work out. And I do think there's been a lot of debate across the media and everything today. Should Elanga have started? And I think it goes without saying. Anthony Elanga should have started that football match without a shadow of a doubt. We can't change it, but it's something for the future. Unless he's unfit, which of course then Nuno has a headache on his hands and he has to do what he has to do and he has to improvise. I get it. And there is the sort of argument that was a potential reason. Maybe he's resting him because there's a lot of football matches coming up in the next coming weeks. But for me, Elanga should have started, and that is a big problem. So we've spoke about Abbert, we've spoke about the unbalance. Let's get on to tactics in general. Now, why were Man City so good? I am going to put their greatness down to pretty much one player, Mateo Kovacic. I thought he had an absolutely outstanding game of football. He was doing the hard yards. He was splitting up Forest press and taking the ball for Man City. One big issue that Forest had was that press that they usually have of Chris Wood, the kind of curving runs that he makes, and then he either has Elanga next to him or in this case Hudson-Odoi. That wasn't working because Kovacic, he'd sit in between them, just behind them, and as they pressed the goalkeeper, which did work on a couple of occasions, when Forest effectively pressed and they marked out Kovacic from being able to make that move, Man City panicked. Forest got close a couple of times. But in that game, the problem that I saw was that those two were pressing, but there was no kind of thought of who's going to stop Kovacic, because he just takes it on the half turn, makes the run into the midfield, and you've already took out two players there from that press. And if the midfield are going to come further forward, it allows other players in the Man City team to go forward and use that space. So one thing I would have done is definitely look into that sort of press with Kovacic and trying to stop that from happening, because it was all too easy. There was almost no point of Chris Wood and Hudson-Odoi pressing. They may as well have stayed back, let Man City play with it a little bit, and just sat in a mid-block. So that was one observation that I made from the press. And in general, as I mentioned earlier, I think Forest were a little bit one-sided in terms of attacking the left. They should have had a right winger on there. So it's something to think about. And also as well, not really tactical, but more just a sort of focus point. I do think that these players, they put on a great performance this year and they've been fantastic. But the lack of composure, especially Danilo, obviously, I know that his injury is massive and it has had an effect, and I feel like this season it's never going to be perfect. We kind of know that. But there was a lot of times when it literally just required a very simple sideways pass and just trying a little bit too much. So it's something to think about. You know, mistakes happen, players do have bad days, and I do firmly believe that Danilo is struggling with confidence from the injury. But, you know, these are for Nuno to make these decisions, and I do think that Danilo, unfortunately, was a big problem in that first half for Forest, just giving away the ball too much, because if you're going to be playing counter-attack against Manchester City, you almost can't get anything wrong. And that, unfortunately, didn't happen. Well, it did happen. You did get stuff wrong. So that's a little bit more on the tactics, but something that Forest can look to, and I'm sure they've already picked up for the next coming games. So just a word on Man City. Obviously, I mentioned Mateo Kovacic was superb. I do think that Man City in general had a good game. Nico O'Reilly is clearly a very good talent. Just a couple of roulettes, like it was nothing. You know, he's got a bit of flair. He's got good height. Physically, he's a strong player. So Man City are producing some good talents. Rico Lewis's goal was superb as well. And him inverting actually made it really difficult for Forest, because they couldn't deal with the fact that Man City were having that inverted fullback and having an extra man in midfield when they were going forward, and Forest didn't want to commit too much to that. So the tactical wise, City they just played Forest off the field, which is always frustrating because of how we played against them last time, and I feel like we neutralised them really well. Whereas this time we almost took a bit of a step back, and we gave them a little bit too much respect, which was frustrating. And that is the big sort of underlying problem with this game. It was so frustrating because we know Forest are way better than this, and we know that a lot of games they patch these problems really quick. But unfortunately with Man City, unless you try and get a goal in that first half, or you get a goal early into the second half, which again, unlucky not to with Elanga really and a couple of Gibbs White chances, you aren't going to beat City. So you have to strike when you can, and you have to strike well, and you have to be clinical. And unfortunately, yesterday just wasn't the day for that. So fair play to Man City. I don't think their support was very good, but I'll not go down that controversial route. And to be honest, you know, good luck to them in the final, but I am still going to want Crystal Palace to win, because a Crystal Palace win would be good for football. But I'll leave you to debate that yourselves. I hope Crystal Palace win. It'd be nice to see them win a bit of silverware. And to be honest, I'm just gutted that we won't get that shot. But our time will come at some point, I'm sure. So in general then, what are my thoughts on the game? As I mentioned, I just think that Forest tactically got it wrong from the start. Anthony Elanga being omitted from the squad was the biggest reason I think that they didn't get something from that game. At least a goal, because Elanga adds those runs, those darting runs that he makes, others can't do. I know that Elanga has almost been playing for quite a couple of months now. He's been that auxiliary striker, kind of helping out, a lot of freedom, running left wing, right wing, and that's a really good tactical sort of addition by Nuno. That was a really smart use, because Elanga at times when he is just on one side, it is a bit ineffective, whereas when you give him that freedom, it opens up his creative mind, which I think is really important, and he makes those darting runs that others won't. And that's why I don't think Callum Hudson-Odoi suited that role yesterday that he was playing. He was trying to emulate what Elanga does, but that isn't Hudson-Odoi's game, I don't think. He can't make those runs off the shoulder. He doesn't have the sort of striker mentality, but he's a great winger. He can cut in and he can create from there. But in terms of kind of running to the left, running to the right, and doing what Elanga does in a lot of games, that's not his game, in my opinion. So we definitely missed Elanga. Injuries as well don't help. In fact, probably the second biggest thing as well is we are missing the spine of this football team. Ryan Yates is missing. That was a game where Ryan Yates would have been massive, I think, in that game. Nico Williams is missing. Toffolo doesn't offer the attacking sort of things that Nico does. So you're missing that. Ola Aina, he's missing with an injury. And it goes without saying, he's my player of the season this year. So obviously, Forest are missing him. So it's a bit disappointing, but you're missing the spine. Elanga didn't start. And in general, Man City had a good game. So that's my thoughts. And also, of course, the woodwork denied us. So that's my thoughts on the Wembley result. And I do, to answer the question, think that tactics did cost Forest a chance in the final at Wembley. But that's how the cookie crumbles. It is what it is. Forest are out of the FA Cup semi-final. Now a massive game against Brentford on Thursday night. They've got to win this game. They've got to win at least 2 more after that if they do win. And then I think we've got a very good chance at the Champions League. If you haven't already, go and go and watch my most recent video, which was one on the Champions League. Do I think Forest will get the Champions League? Yes, I do. But here are my thoughts of why on that video. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. Lots of people watching, not all of them subscribing. If you can do me a favour, subscribe. I can keep making more content. I'm looking forward to being back, uploading regularly. I should be back Friday with another vlog. But until then, have a fantastic week. See you soon. And that is my thoughts on Forest loss at Wembley. See you soon. Subscribe. Take care.